Alright guys, thought I'd take you along for a typical project that happens in the shop quite often. We're going to do rebuild on a Banshee motor. This one I've already rebuilt it a couple times, and you know, I don't know what goes on. This guy is hard on stuff. I've done tons of these things, and this is the only one that ever seems to have a problem. So originally it was a 4mm long rod, and that's what it's going back to. There's the crank. That's a Vito's crank. I got one case half over here. I'm just doing the tedious job of cleaning up all these gasket surfaces here. It sucks. It's time consuming, but you've got to do it. So there's one case half there. And the other one, I don't know where it is. Oh, there it is. It's down there. But anyway, I'm just gonna do this here, and I'll film, you know, every step of the way. But yeah, I got basically the whole motor here. This thing was detonating really bad, and blew a hole through the piston, and you know, a lot of that garbage went down into this crank here. These bearings, you can see how much they walk side to side there. This is the bearing on the flywheel side. They're junk. I mean, you ought to hear how loud they are, or they were, when this engine was running. But yeah, he was detonating this thing pretty bad. Completely burnt these reeds up. Let me see if I can get it to more clearly come out. But yeah, they're all burned up on that one cylinder. The reeds on the other side, they look like they should. Still in really good shape. And that's what they look like when you've got detonation going on. So anyway, I'm just going to keep cleaning up these gasket surfaces here. I'm just using a straight razor blade there, just real light pressure. Like I said, there's nothing glorious about this job here, but you got to do it. Alright, so here's the cases all cleaned up. I thoroughly degreased them, took them outside, pressure washed them, dried them all off. All the sealing surfaces have been cleaned up. I've got this crankshaft sitting in here. This is a 4mm long rod crank. The reason I put it in here is because I wanted to make sure before I got too carried away here that everything was going to be, you know, fine on clearances. So you can see the weld on the crank there. I wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to interfere, you know, with that bottom part of the case there. And I'll set the top half of the case on here too and make sure that we're good there. I didn't weld that, that's the way it came. It's actually not as flat as some of them are, but it doesn't stick out far enough to cause an issue. So anyhow, I've got this sitting in here, new crank seals of course. This crank's been trued and welded. And next step is to clean up all of these transmission components here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these shafts over to the buffer, and I'm going to completely polish out those transmission shafts, and that's just going to make for a really smooth action when you go to shift. Those shift forks there, those things they'll slide really nicely on these shafts after they're polished. So sometimes when you buy stuff from Harbor Freight, like this buffer here, you get it home and you use it one time and you realize it's just a piece of shit. But I can't say the same thing about this buffer here. This thing was like 40 bucks, and we've used the shit out of it, and it's not bad, you know. It does the job, does everything I ask it to do. And anyway, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see these shafts, but you can see there's you know, there's some wear marks in these things, and we'll polish these out here and see how they turn out. Not really necessary to do this. You know, you can clean these up and they'll probably work fine for you, but I figure we've got the motor apart, I've got this buffer, so what the hell, might as well. And I do think that this will help, I really do. I don't think it's a waste of time by any means. Just using a medium compound here, not very aggressive, pretty light pressure. Basically just work it back and forth. I don't know how well this comes in the camera there, but there's still some compound on this thing. I'll go grab a rag here and wipe this off so you can really see the difference. Alright, so that definitely shined this up really good. Here's your before, there's after. Thing almost looks like it's chrome, but you know, it did take some of that wear spot, you know, it took some of the wear spots out of the shaft here, so like I said, I figure anything you can do will help. And the top I didn't polish there. That goes into the case, so it's not going to help us any, but right here, that's where those forks ride, and that's the difference. Alright, so the first thing to start off with when you're assembling the transmission is get your shift drum in there. That's that guy there that I'm spinning, followed by the shift shafts and forks. These things are all numbered. You know, I don't know if they are numbered. But anyway, they only go together one way. These have the same part number on them, so I guess they're not all numbered. But just keep them organized. Be thorough when you do this, but put them, you know, back in the way they came out, and just make sure you keep track of the way they came out. But anyway, put your shift drum in first, and then slide those shift shafts through. Grab the forks on your way in, and with these you can see that groove right there. That's for an E-clip. Groove right there on this one, and you need to make sure to put those E-clips in there. It's important. After this, we're going to set the main shafts in. You know, this bike never had any transmission problems. When we took it apart, the tranny was always fine, but we're still going to clean it up. I just use brake clean. I don't know what other guys do, but this always works good for me. I just hose it off really good with brake clean, blow it off with compressed air, and then I've got a oil can full of motor oil or transmission oil. You know, the stuff with wet clutch additives for motorcycle use, and I just lube everything up and put it in there. But like I said, all of this stuff's in really good shape, but it doesn't hurt to put an eye on everything. Like I said, be thorough about all this, take your time. Here's your output shaft, or yeah, excuse me, this is the input shaft. There's the side that the clutch basket goes on, and that's the output shaft there. You got your sprocket on that side. Kickstart idler gear here on the end. You know, feel the bearings, make sure all that stuff feels good. But I'm going to clean this off, blow it off, lubricate it, place it in the transmission here, and we'll keep going with it. Alright, so I've got the camera kind of trying to face down on the transmission here the best I can. Hopefully you guys can see what's going on. After you get your shift shafts and your forks and your drum all in, like I said, you've got these E-clips here. They need to go into these grooves on these shift shafts. And these things, they're not always easy to get in there. Some people may replace this stuff. That's fine, you know. And I'm showing you guys how to assemble this motor. There's lots of ways to assemble this stuff. This is the way I do it. It's always worked for me. So, you know, if somebody's showing you a different way or you've got a different way of doing it, that's fine. So we've got our other E-clip here. Like I said, clean all this stuff off real thoroughly. You don't want any foreign debris in this motor anywhere. Like I said, these E-clips can be buggers. Okay, so once you've got the E-clips in here, the next step is to retain. I'm going to pull this crankshaft out real quick here. I don't know if I ever mentioned why this motor blew up in the first place. I'll do that now. The reason this thing blew up is because of detonation. He had a spark plug that was fouled out, and it would light up every once in a while. And you know, when this motor was detonating, that was really hard on it. And he burned a hole through the piston. A bunch of debris went into the lower end, wiped out the bearings in the crankshaft there. We could have probably got it sent out and rebuilt, but we just ordered a new one. Just might as well cover our butts and just start new again. So that detonation's pretty serious stuff. You know, if you've got a bike that's kind of popping or not running on both cylinders all the time, don't try to ride it out. Bring it back to camp, bring it back home, wherever you are, and figure out what's going on with it. Because most of the time, it's just a real quick, easy fix, and it doesn't have to be a very big deal. But you know, if you try to ride it out and you figure, oh, it'll clear itself out, that's when you get into trouble. And you know, a couple dollar spark plug can remedy a motor that's running poorly. But if you keep running it real hard and it's detonating like that, you're going to wind up, you know, killing it. And I mean, this is almost $1,000 worth of damage over just a $3, $4 spark plug. So it doesn't pay to screw around, you know. So the next thing I'm going to do here is put this retainer in for the shift drum. That's held in with 2 screws. I'm going to grab some Loctite, and I'm just going to put a drop of Loctite on the screw here. It fits in there pretty snugly, but a little Loctite never hurt anything. I'm not sure, but for some reason I think that these things have a drop of Loctite on them from the factory. I could be wrong, which I don't care if I am or not. I'm still going to do it. And I don't really torque these things super hard. You know, I get them pretty snugged up, and I've never had one come loose on me. So I'm just using a little bit of blue Loctite there. Like I said, I've never had an issue with these things coming loose. I don't know if that's, you know, giving credit to the Loctite or what, but anyway, we'll get these things tightened down here. and then we'll put the retainer on for the other shift shaft. One thing with this shift drum, what would you call it, hold down, is it also doubles as the hold down for the shift shaft here. So that's two birds there with one stone, the way this is designed. And then right here is where the other locking mechanism goes. There's a little bend over tab here. It's been bent over once before. It's the original one, and I think it'll go another time. Some guys don't reuse all this stuff. They'll just buy new, and that's not a horrible idea, but I'm going to reuse it. I don't think I'm going to run into any problems with it. So I just hit it with a little brake clean there. I'm going to bend this tab over just a little bit more here. Not too much. Because you still want to leave it a little bent up, but that fits over the end of the shift shaft there. We'll get this thing to thread in. There we go. Now I'm not Loctiting this because it's got a jam nut there on the end. What I'll do is run this in. Right about there. Grab a 17 millimeter. That's what size this nut is. And what I'm really looking to do is just line up one of the sides. You know, we're going to go for snug here, but mainly what I'm going to do is try to line one edge of this nut up with this locking tab the best I can. There's no reason to reef on all this stuff. That's why you've got all these locking tabs, and the best way to fold this tab over is with a pair of channel locks. Got a pair of channel locks here. We'll just stick the outer edge there, and it folds that tab right over like you want it to. Alright, so that's in. So all the shift drum and shift shafts are all locked in. Like I said, I've got some oil here. It's not a bad idea to put a couple drops on these shafts here. You know, we don't want anything dry right off the bat. And it's kind of hard to get to these shafts once the transmission's in there. So just a little oil in here. Little assembly oil. You never hurt anything with a little lubrication. So you can see, you know, how that works there. I've already cleaned up these transmission shafts here. Brake clean, compressed air. I've checked them out. They all look great. So on the end of this shaft here, you've got a bearing. I cleaned that out. It still feels really tight, really good. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil right in here. That'll flow in there. That'll go on the end of the shaft like that. There's letters on this bearing here. Numbers, excuse me, and letters. I always put those toward the outside. And this is going to sit right in here. This bearing here has got a ring all the way around it, and that needs to seat in the case. Give it a spin there. I'm going to put a little bit of oil right here where the fork rides. And for the transmission shaft that sits in here, you've got these steel half moons here. These are critical. These need to make it back in here. If you forget these, you're going to be running into some problems. They just sit right in there like that. There's a small one on the small end here. Get these seated in here. Not pinch your glove in here. I like wearing gloves, but sometimes it's just a pain in the ass. Alright, you know, you do notice that I still have this seal on here. We just rebuilt this motor, shit, I don't know, last season. You know, this stuff doesn't have very much time on it. I don't feel like I'm half-assing it by not even pulling the seal off because I just know that it's not very old. You know, say what you will, but I'm going to run it. So this is your output shaft here. It all looks really good. And this guy is going to drop right in here. What you need to do is line up these forks. There's quite a few things to line up at once. You've got to line up the grooves on the bearings here with those clips we just put in. You've got to line up your forks here, and you'll feel it when it sits down in there. Now's a really good time to what I call bench test the transmission. As you can see, it's in neutral right now. I'm spinning the input shaft, and we've got nothing on the sprocket side there, so that's neutral. Alright, everything's doing what I want it to do. So that's basically the transmission. Bench test it before you put these cases together. Make sure you've got all your clips, retainers, E-clips, all that crap. Make sure you've got it all in. Take your time when you do this. If you're in a big hurry, don't put one of these engines together. With the motors that, excuse me, the engines that have this horizontal type crankcase where the seam is going horizontally, man, it makes it easy to set all this stuff in here. It's a lot harder to do on an engine like on a Blaster or most other motorcycle engines where the split in the cases is right down the center where it's going vertically. You've got a lot of stuff to kind of jostle into place and make sure that everything goes in there. This is pretty simple to do here. So now that we've got all this stuff in here, we'll put the crankshaft back in, and we've got new seals on that crankshaft. We're going to set that in here, and that's going to be the last thing before we put a little Yamaha bond on here and bolt these things together. Alright, now that the crankshaft's in here, we're going to take a little brake clean on a paper towel, and we're going to go all around this thing and get this thing clean as we possibly can before we apply the sealant between the cases here. When you put your crankshaft in, depending on what you're putting in, you're going to have different ways of holding these bearings in place. The factory style has pins on the end of the bearings. Those are called anti-rotation pins. If you've got those pins, there's provisions in the lower half of the case here for those pins, and you need to make sure that those are all in their provisions. That's a big deal. Another thing to take in consideration when you're doing this is that these crankshaft seals need to go in at the same time that the crank does. They've got a ridge on the center of them here, and you cannot put those in properly after the cases are put together. So keep in mind, when this crankshaft goes in, the seals need to go in too for the crankshaft. Over here on the output shaft, right behind the sprocket, that can go in afterwards. It doesn't matter. I never took this one off, so you know I'm covered there. But keep in mind, these seals need to go in now. So next thing to do is, like I said, we'll clean it up here, and we'll get all our nuts and fasteners cleaned up to fasten these two halves together. There are torque specs on everything. To the best of my knowledge, it's 20 to 22 foot-pounds on the studs, the 8 studs. On the engine side, I call this the engine side, and everything on this side of the wall here, I call the transmission side. I believe that the transmission side is 7 foot-pounds and 20 to 22 on the engine side. Look it up. You know, don't go off what I'm saying. Verify for yourself. I'm not going to be responsible for the torque specs of your motor, but I'm going to check it out anyway myself. But use a good torque wrench too. Don't use a piece of shit from Harbor Freight, you know. Alright guys, one other thing that I want to mention here is that when you're working on something like this, it is extremely important to stay hydrated. Make sure you hydrate yourself with proper fluids. You know, that's important to do. So anyway, I was going to film doing the Yamaha bond on this thing, and the camera I'm using, which is a flip, it's only got a half-hour record time, and the thing ran out of time right as I was starting to apply this stuff. And when I put this Yamaha bond on, I don't like screwing around. I just want to get it on, take my time putting it on, but not too much time. Like I said, be real thorough with it and get these things bolted together. You didn't miss anything. I just used an acid brush right here to apply this Yamaha bond. Works pretty good for me. And I spread it all over those surfaces we talked about. And I put the Crankshaft together on the bottom of the engine here. You've got these 8 nuts. They're all numbered. You just go in the sequence, you know, of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up onto 16. So this is your first 8. I torqued these to 10 foot-pounds, and then I stepped up on the torque wrench to 20 foot-pounds. Excuse me, 21 foot-pounds. I decided that was going to be my final torque on this, is 21. Once you finish that, you go over here to the transmission side, and you pick up where you left off. So you got 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 on up to 16. I torqued these to 7 foot-pounds, and I try to do all this as quick as I can. You know, I know this is a non-hardening sealant here in between the cases, but I still think the sooner you get these cases put together, the better off you are. One extremely important thing I will tell you guys is that if you're using RTV, you're screwing up. You're not supposed to use this. This isn't meant for sealing up engine cases. I know guys on YouTube, they'll tell you to use this. Well, don't listen to them. They're dumbasses. When these engines are put together by Yamaha, they're put together with Yamaha Bond 4 from the factory. That's what they recommend. If you want to use some of that 3 bond, that's fine, as long as you're using something that is specifically designed for sealing cases. You're doing the right thing. Now I know you're going to say, well geez, you got an old ass tube of Yamaha bond there. It's not old. The reason it's all wore off like this is because I need this back and forth before I use it every time. And I think that this stuff will separate. It's not like it's old. I mean, I think it'll separate within a day or two. So I like to knead this back and forth before I apply it. And because I need it, all of the label comes off. But this is Yamaha Bond 4. It's what I've always used, never had an issue. Don't use this crap. This is made for the valve cover gasket on your Honda Civic, or you know, an oil pan gasket on your old Ford, something like that. It's not made to go in between these cases. I would not recommend it. You're spending the money on this anyway. Spend a little bit more money, get the proper sealant for the cases. That's part of the reason I even did this video, is because I want to show some important things that I can't find explained on some of the other YouTube videos. So what I've done here is I've got the transmission in, I've got the crankshaft in, we've put our crankshaft seals in, we've got our case bond in between here, and we've got everything torqued down. We've got it fully assembled here as far as the two halves are concerned. So one thing I like to do, this is just something that I do, you know, I don't know if it matters if you don't do it, but I like to load up a little bit of Caster 927 into one of these oil cans here. It's my premix that I use. And I like to lubricate the thrust washers, the needle bearings, and the lower rod. I like to put a little bit of this 927 down in these holes here. There's 4 of them. And what these holes are is they're oiling holes for the bearings. Some of your fuel oil premix, as it enters the engine, it's going to go down in there and it's going to lubricate those bearings. That's one thing you want to make sure you do. You know, before I put these cases on the camera here, when I cleaned them, I chased all the threads with a tap. I cleaned out all these holes. That's part of prepping them. Just make sure you do it all. But you want to make sure these aren't clogged up or they don't have debris or chunks of shit in here. You know, those are your roller bearings. These motors, they'll spin up to 10,000 RPMs. So you want to make sure that when you're spinning something around that fast, you've got really good lubrication in those bearings. So what I'll typically do is I'll put some lubricant down those holes. I'll put some on the lower rod bearings, and I'll do it on the upper wrist pin bearing. When I'm putting the top end together, that's another video. We've got the cylinders out at the machine shop now being bored. Like I said, this motor had a detonation issue. We had aluminum everywhere, and it wiped out that one cylinder pretty good. So we've got those. Those should be back in a couple days, and I'll do a video on the top end. I already know there's like 100,000 top end videos on YouTube, but I just kind of feel like I want to do a complete engine build, you know, and that's going to cover the top end too. So for right now, what I'm going to do is cover this up, put a bag over it, and tomorrow I'll do a video and we'll start working on the clutch side. We're going to put a new Henson basket on this thing. Actually, I don't know if it's a Henson or not. It's a billet basket. I don't know where it came from, but it might be a Henson. But anyway, we're going to put the billet basket on, take a look at the cushions inside the clutch basket on the back side of it when you expose them there. Put the crank drive gear on, all that good stuff. But it's kind of getting late, so I'm gonna drink this beer here, cover this sucker up, and I'll continue on it tomorrow.